All right, folks, now let's get that little Ritz cracker of a computer to make some magic. And we're going to do that first by writing some programs in Microsoft MakeCode. So if you type in makecode.adafruit.com, we're going to hop over, and there are versions of MakeCode for lots of other products. So there's another very popular microcontroller called the Microbit that kids in the UK are using. It can do quite a bit. So even though, these things are brightly colored and it looks like, it's something that young children can use, and it's a great way to introduce children into programs, this device is extraordinarily powerful, and we'll use this as a launching pad to discuss some advanced topics too. But first, let's get the little circle to do all kinds of cool stuff. So if you're at Adafruit's MakeCode page, let's click on New Projects here. And we're going to see on the left-hand side, you'll see the simulator, the Circuit Playground Express rolls in. If for some reason you don't see it, you see in the lower left-hand corner here, that shows or hides the simulator. So, you can give yourself some more programming room if you want to as well. Before, when I was actually showing you the very large Circuit Playground Express, I just clicked in the lower right-hand corner here, right underneath the Circuit Playground, there's a square. This one is supposed to be showing that it's got some lines to get out of full screen mode. So that's what that does. Just clicking on this is in and out of full screen mode. But let's write some code to get a little bit of animation happening right from the start here. Multicolored little buttons they look like over here. These are referred to as drawers, and this is actually where you'll find different programming statements, and they're color coordinated and they're organized by topic. So the first one controls lights, it's called light, and then there's input statements, music statements, networking, loops, all of this stuff, and there's even some more advanced stuff. So we'll take a look at it later. Now there are lots of different ways that you can get this device to operate, but the first thing that we're going to do is you can see that this is a little bit of a C here, and it says forever. We can drag things over out of the drawers and plop them into forever, and it will continue to do whatever command we have in here forever. Now we'll also see that there's an ability for us to, and you can see for forever is the same kind of green here, which responds to loops. If we click on loops here, we see, well, there's one on start, which will only execute code when your Circuit Playground starts or resets. You can also see that there are ones that can repeat things for a certain amount of time. So we'll explore some of these things later on. What we're going to do right now, though, in this forever loop here is, why don't we go up to light? We'll get it to do some fancy stuff right away. And one of the first things that we see here is this thing called show ring. Let's drag that over, and you can see when I drag it over right out of the blue drawer here, and I let it go, it lines up so it can fit inside of the forever ring here. We see everything looks like it's red, and we can see over here in the simulator, without me actually even pressing on the play button, all of these lights show up as red. Now if I click on stop, that stops them as well. So that's pretty cool. I've just gone ahead and I've turned everything into red. Now if I click on this again, I can put another ring right below this. So let's say, for example, I want to start out fully red, but then what I want to do after this is I want to change some of these lights to yellow. Well, if I click on yellow here, then all of a sudden I can just click on anything I want to turn to yellow, so I can make every other light of the 10 lights that I have here as yellow. And if we take a look at what happens over here, it'll just take a little while before this code starts to run again, or you can click on the play button to start it running, and I can see that it's flashing between red and yellow, red and yellow. It continues to do this in a loop over and over and over again without stopping. So nice. Let's see what happens if we click on the JavaScript and take a look. So these are actually statements in the JavaScript programming language, and they represent exactly what we had more visually drawn out here in MakeCode. So inside of JavaScript, it says forever. Oh, that looks like the forever loop that we had. It says the word function. I guess that's a function that does stuff. And then it says light show ring here, and then it's got the word red 10 times. And then underneath that, that must mean this second ring that I've got here. It says red, yellow, red, yellow, red, yellow, red, yellow. That's kind of interesting. So again, we didn't have to know the specifics of typing this in. We didn't need to get the syntax perfect. I wonder what happens. I wonder if we can actually type in and make some changes in here. Let's go ahead and change that first red. It seems to know the word red. I wonder if I click on that first red, backspace over the word red, and then type in blue in the beginning, and let's see if I do blue at the end here, B-L-U-E, like this, I wonder if my code will work. Well, let's go back over to blocks and see what happens with blocks. And whoa, I see that this is blue and blue here. And in fact, we can see at the executing simulator over here, it in fact is working. So it's possible for you to go ahead and type in some JavaScript code. There might be some things where, you feel like you can type them a little bit faster. And, in this case, we figured out how to type the stuff into JavaScript, even though we didn't know JavaScript proper. Now you might wonder, well, what would happen if I typed in something that doesn't exist. It's not a color. So I'm going to backspace over blue, and I'm going to type in pork chop. And so now I'll click back on blocks, and notice now when this starts to run here, you see how this is grayed out? That's supposed to suggest that this particular light here, which is actually the first one, so they're labeled 1 through 10 here, this is showing grayed out here too. It's because pork chop isn't a valid color. Now it's not telling me that there's an error, it's just not showing it. So I'm going to go back. Why don't I just go ahead and use blue in there as well? By the way, if you screw some stuff up and type some nonsense in here and then try to go back, it'll be underlined. It says, do you want to discard what you do? Do you want to stay in JavaScript to try to change that? There's also, just in the way that there are in other environments, if you do Control-Z on a PC or Command-Z on a Mac, that acts as undo, so you should be able to undo what you've done here. Or you could just go ahead and discard it and go back to where things had worked when you finally first got into this JavaScript area here. So all that's looking good. We're learning a little bit about our programming environment. Now let's go back and explore some of the other cool stuff that we have. So if you click on the light drawer again, and notice I can't see my program, but if I just mouse over here, I can drag it. On the Mac, I'm doing the sort of fingers down and moving it over to move this stuff back and forth here. I can start to add more stuff down here. And what's cool is you can see that the second item under light, so again, I clicked on the light drawer to expose all of those options here. There's something that says show animation. So if I click on that guy, drag it down. Now the first animation here looks like a little rainbow, and if we take a look, holy unicorn, you can see it actually is showing a rainbow animation going around here. And the length of time it's going to be showing that for is, this is 500 ms, which is 500 milliseconds. If you actually want to make this longer, you can change that number. I'm going to say go to 2 seconds, which is 2000 milliseconds, and so we can show it shows the rainbow animation for a little bit longer. Now you might say, well, that's kind of cool, and in fact I just want to show the rainbow animation. I don't want to show these earlier ones. Can I get rid of it? Well, if you click on any of the rings and you drag out, everything travels with it. So it's possible to leave some stuff over there if you want. You can also drag items out one at a time. So if I hold down, on the Mac it's holding down the command key. I believe it's the control key on Windows, but if I just hold down that command key, the one that looks like a little clover on the Mac, and drag out, then I've just deleted I've just removed this particular statement from my code. And if I go back into JavaScript, I can see that line where I had the red and yellow is gone, and I see this new line in here with show animation. Again, we're not going to be spending any time in JavaScript, but I wanted to show you the code is being changed behind the scenes. Now, if you totally want to get rid of show ring, you can either click on it and press your delete key, or you can just drag it back into the drawers there, and you see a little trash can icon shows up, and you'll get a whisking sort of sound. Now, I also want to get rid of show ring here too, so I can just go ahead, command click on the Mac, control click probably on the PC, let go, that's gone. Now the show animation is just going to do this holy unicorn rainbow animation over and over and over and over again. That's looking pretty cool. Saying, well, are there other kinds of animations? Because I see that there's this little down arrow, which usually means there's a pull down arrow for some other stuff. And if I click on that arrow next to this rainbow unicorn circle here, if I hover my cursor over each of these different images, I see that there are 6 built-in animations for this ring of what Adafruit calls 10 neopixel RGB lights. If I hover my cursor over, I get a tooltip here that says they call that one rainbow, they call this one running lights, they call this one comet, they call this one sparkle, they call this one the color wipe, and they call this one the theater chase. So what I'm going to suggest is, why don't you pause right now, after I tell you what I'd like you to do, why don't you go ahead and see if you can add animations for all 6 of those built-in animations all in a row. So it'll just continue to loop around and do each of those for 2 seconds each. So why don't we pause? You can give a shot and see if you can do that. I've unpaused. So if you couldn't do it, well, just follow along. It's the same steps that we've done before. I'm just going to slide over a little bit more to give myself some more room here. I'm going to click on the light drawer. I'm going to grab show animation here, and if I click on the rainbow that's dragged over, I'm going to click on these running lights right here. I'm going to change the 500 to 2 seconds, which is 2000. Now, in addition to dragging things over, if you want to reuse a block that you've got, you can also right-click on that block, or it's the 2-finger touch on the Macintosh. A little menu comes up, and I can say, hey, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to duplicate this. So we can see I've made another change, and I can just duplicate it again. I can duplicate it again, and I want 6 of these animations all together. duplicate. Now what's nice about this is it's duplicating exactly what I had here with the 2000, so I'm not going to need to change that each time I've got it down here. And now I can click on this and go down, and I can turn this one into the comet, and this one into the sparkle, and this one here into, it's called the color wipe. And then the last one that we have down here is called the theater chase. And so if we want to see how this looks, we can just go ahead, and if you wait 2 seconds each animation there, we'll see that these things are changing. There's our comment, there's our sparkle, there's our let me see what that other one was called, color wipe, and then the last one was running lights. So you can watch this animation, and pretty snazzy, very easy for us to do. In most programming languages, just to give you a sense, it would have required a lot of work and a lot of expense even to get something as simple as this up and running. Let's go ahead and save our work. You see down here where there's a little save icon, it says Untitled. Well, you can actually give this program names, this project a name, and that will be saved to your browser. So you've got a particular version of the browser which is set up here. I'm just going to type right in here, or backspace over Untitled, and I'm going to call this Constant Animations, which I think is probably a pretty good name. Now, if you click back on the Home button up here, you probably now have this little MakeCode project here which says Constant Animations. And if you click on that, you will see what you had just been coding, which is great. Now what you might also want to do is you may want to go ahead and save this to your Circuit Playground device. So if you have a device, you can put this program on the device and you can see the lights light up and show your friends and family and loved ones and people you want to impress. So let's see, how would we go about doing that? Well, what you should do is you should plug your Circuit Playground Express into the USB cable that came with the device. So hopefully you bought a USB cable, or if you're using the micro USB cable here, hopefully it's one that supports data, so it's one that you can actually use to sync data with a device. Most of them are, that's the USB standard. Kind of rarely there are ones that just support charging. They have one less wire on the inside, and it's tough to tell which one is which, but that's why if you ordered a cable or received a cable with the device, then that cable should be good. You might even want to put a piece of tape around it so that you don't confuse it with a charging cable, just in case you've got one lying around the house. So now that you've got it plugged into the USB device, what you should do is, now that you've got your Circuit Playground Express plugged into your USB cable, you should now plug the cable into your computer. So I happen to be using a Mac. I've just plugged it in. Now, the center button on your Circuit Playground Express here says Reset on it. And I'm going to click on the one on my physical device. And when you do that, you should see that the Circuit Playground Express lights turn green. And that essentially is saying, give me a program. I am ready to receive a program. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the Download button in my MakeCode in the browser here. And I get the standard Save dialog box. You should see something similar under Windows. And if I go down here to devices, so wherever you can go and typically where you can access, let's say, a USB drive if you've plugged it in, I'm going to click on this. Mine happens to be called C Play Boot. Yours probably is as well. It treats this almost like it's a USB drive, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the Save button. Now that I've clicked on it, it's going to save the code that I have in my MakeCode environment in the browser to my Circuit Playground Express device. And all of a sudden, whoa, I can see my device has all of these different sparkle animations happening, or I shouldn't call them sparkle because that's only one of the animations, but all 6 animations are showing, and it cycles through. It spends 2 seconds on each of these different animations. Perfect. Congratulations. You just coded a device, a microcontroller. You downloaded your code there. Give yourself a boom shakalaka. You should feel really good about that. Now, if you want to stop the flashiness, if you press the reset button again, things turn green, which essentially says, hey, I'm now ready to be loaded in. By the way, in the Mac in the upper right-hand corner, you might see a little message which says disk not ejected properly. You've done everything fine. It's simply that your Macintosh isn't used to having a microcontroller connected to it. And when you've downloaded your program, the microcontroller says, okay, I don't care about the Mac anymore. I want to continue to run. So it ejects itself. And so that's why you get this little error message which shows up. But you haven't broken anything. You haven't lost any of your code. Everything is looking really good. So if you press on, again, that reset button here, things are going to turn green so that you can download code again if you want to. If you press reset again, though, what it does is it just plays whatever the last program is that you loaded onto the device. Remember, microcontrollers only run one program at a time. If you want to shut the device off completely, what you can do is just disconnect it from its power supply. So if you go ahead and unplug it from the USB, there's no power getting into this. Now you might say, hey, I'd like to drag this around and show this to my friends, but I don't necessarily want to drag my computer around. Well, if you have the battery backpack here, I have just a set of AA batteries that are plugged into it right now. When I plug it in, I can see that it's twirling around and doing all sorts of neat stuff. But if you click on reset here, now watch what's going to happen. It doesn't know about in here, or it's not connected to the USB drive, so it's not going to wait and try to download some stuff. Instead, what it's going to do is it's just going to turn red, stop, and restart again. So what we have is just a restarting, which happens whenever you click on reset when it's not connected to the USB. Again, if you want to shut it off completely, you just go ahead, pull out the power supply, and it stops running. So if you get back into MakeCode here, again, you can close the disk not ejected properly. It's probably just Mac users are getting that. You can X out after the download has been completed. One other thing that I want to show you as well, though, is you can actually save a copy of this code to your disk, to USB devices. That's actually a pretty good thing to do, just in case things get wiped out of your browser. Remember, what you're saving here when we go back to home is this is just under your particular browser on your computer. So what you might want to do is get into any of your projects here, and if you click on the little disk, you'll see this same thing came up when you clicked on download, so it actually does the same thing as download. Instead of selecting a Circuit Playground Express device, you can save it to, so if I want to save it to the desktop here, you can call it whatever you want. The default name that I'm being given here is Circuit Playground-Constant Animations. That's a fine name. If you want, you can get rid of even the Circuit Playground part, but I'm going to put that in a new folder here, so I'm just going to click on a folder just to keep my stuff organized. I'll call this CPX Projects, and I'll say create and save, and that saves this. Now, let's imagine, for example, we're back on the home screen here. We get into a new project, or you're in a new browser, and you want to load in the stuff that you were working on. Well, one thing you can do is you can go and find that file, and in my case, I'd saved it in the desktop. I created a special folder called CPX Projects. But if you click on that file and you just drag it over, by the way, notice, at least for Circuit Playground Express, the files end in an extension .uf2. But if I let go, I can see all of a sudden things change behind the scenes here, and there's all of the code that I had before. And in fact, it even remembers that this is called constant animations. So if I made a change in here, and I'll do a change right now, so you'll see that there says music down here. If I want to go ahead and I want to play the power up sound when I first start this, I can move that in, and watch what happens here. We'll hear it. That's the power up sound, and you can play around with some of the sounds if you want to in just a bit. I'm going to stop this from executing, but if I go back over to home, I can see constant animations now, which I had saved before. This is the browser version of it. It has the power up that I just saved. But if I want to make sure, I'm just going to stop this so it doesn't continue to make that noise. If I want to resave this, I've got to actually go ahead and save that separate version locally. So if I click on save here, it will again bring up my typical file save dialog box here. If I click on CPX Express, I can either rename this if I want to. If I want to resave over the one that I've got, I'm going to keep the name the same. Click on save. It'll ask me if I want to replace what's there. If I want to update it, I'll say yes, go ahead and do that, and that's fine. Now, another thing that you can do is if you're back in home, you can also, instead of loading up the new project here, there's something that says import. So if you click on import here, you can import either from things that are saved on the web, so it's possible to save your work, and we'll talk more about that later on, via a web address. And so you can work with somebody else's code, which is just a great way to learn about new things in Circuit Playground. Or you can go ahead and import files here, and if you click on this, it asks you to choose a file. Again, we get our familiar box here to navigate to, find whichever file we want. What we've done here when we say go ahead and select it is we've loaded up that off of disk, just as if we were to drag it in. So again, lots of different ways you can load in old files here. What's interesting about that second bit that I did though when I said import here is it imported this as a separate project. So if I decide, hey, I want to keep constant animations the way it is, but this one here, this new one, I want this one to have the play sound in there. And if I want to call it sound plus constant animations, And if I go back to home, I can see now this is called sound animations, and it's got that sound in there. But if I click on constant animations in here and I decide, all right, I want to get rid of my sound. First, do you remember how to get rid of the sound? If you just go up here and you click on where it says play sound, just on that one block here, you can do a delete right in here, or you could drag it out. So I'm going to press delete. That goes away. And now this doesn't save things on disk, but if I want to go ahead and save things on disk, I can go back and save over what I've got on my disk. There it is. It wants to replace it. And just to really solidify what's happening here, if I go back home, I click on sound and constant animations. Now I don't have a version of this saved with the play sound, but if I go down here and click on my little save button down here, we can see that this offers to save it with the name which was in there, which is sound and constant animation. So if I click on save, now I've got two versions saved to disk with two distinct names. And if I click on my home screen here, I also have two distinct projects here. Each of them is slightly different, this one with the sound and this one without the sound. I think that's enough for our first programming experiment here, but we'll do a little bit more. We'll experiment with buttons and some other things in just a bit. Hope you're feeling good about your skills. Keep at it.